Good afternoon. I'd like to give you all an update on the situation in Afghanistan and our ongoing efforts there, particularly as they relate to U.S. citizens. And then I'm very happy to take your questions. Let me begin with my profound appreciation for our diplomats and service members who are working around the clock at the airport in Kabul and at a growing number of transit sites to facilitate the evacuation of Americans, their families, citizens of allied and partner nations, Afghans who have partnered with us over the last 20 years, and other Afghans at risk. They're undertaking this mission under extremely difficult circumstances, with incredible courage, skill, and humanity. Since August 14th, more than 82,300 people have been safely flown out of Kabul. In the 24-hour period from Tuesday to Wednesday, approximately 19,000 people were evacuated on 90 U.S. military and coalition flights. Only the United States could organize and execute a mission of this scale and this complexity. As the President's made clear, our first priority is the evacuation of American citizens. Since August 14th, we've evacuated at least 4,500 U.S. citizens, and likely more. More than 500 of those Americans were evacuated in just the last day alone. Now, many of you have asked how many U.S. citizens remain in Afghanistan who want to leave the country. Based on our analysis, starting on August 14, when our evacuation operations began, there was then a population of as many as 6,000 American citizens in Afghanistan who wanted to leave. Over the last 10 days, roughly 4,500 of these Americans have been safely evacuated, along with immediate family members. Over the past 24 hours, we've been in direct contact with approximately 500 additional Americans and provided specific instructions on how to get to the airport safely. We'll update you regularly on our progress in getting these 500 American citizens out of Afghanistan. For the remaining roughly 1,000 contacts that we had, who may be Americans seeking to leave Afghanistan, we're aggressively reaching out to them multiple times a day through multiple channels of communication, phone, email, text messaging, to determine whether they still want to leave and to get the most up-to-date information and instructions to them for how to do so. Some may no longer be in the country. Some may have claimed to be Americans, but turn out not to be. Some may choose to stay. We'll continue to try to identify the status and plans of these people in the coming days. Thus, from this list of approximately 1,000, we believe the number of Americans actively seeking assistance to leave Afghanistan is lower, likely significantly lower. Having said that, these are dynamic calculations that we are working hour by hour to refine for accuracy. And let me, if I can, just take a moment to explain why the numbers are difficult to pin down with absolute precision at any given moment. And let me start with Americans who are in Afghanistan and we believe want to leave. First, as I think all of you know, the U.S. government does not track Americans' movements when they travel around the world. When Americans visit a foreign country, or if they reside there, we encourage them to enroll with the U.S. Embassy. Whether they do or not is up to them. It's voluntary. And then when Americans leave a foreign country, it's also up to them to de-enroll. Again, that's a choice, not a requirement. Particularly given the security situation in Afghanistan, for many years, we have urged Americans not to travel there. We've repeatedly asked Americans who are in Afghanistan to enroll. And since March of this year, we've sent 19 separate messages to Americans enrolled with the embassy in Kabul, encouraging and then urging them to leave the country. We've amplified those direct messages on the State Department website and on social media. We even made clear that we would help pay for their repatriation. And we provided multiple communication channels for Americans to contact us if they're in Afghanistan and want help in leaving. The specific estimated number of Americans in Afghanistan who want to leave can go up as people respond to our outreach for the first time. And it can go down when we reach Americans we thought were in Afghanistan who tell us they've already left. There could be other Americans in Afghanistan who never enrolled with the embassy, who ignored public evacuation notices and have not yet identified themselves to us. We've also found that many people who contact us and identify themselves as American citizens, including by filling out and submitting repatriation assistance forms, are not, in fact, U.S. citizens, something that can take some time to verify. Some Americans may choose to stay in Afghanistan, some who are enrolled and some who are not. Many of them are dual nationals who may consider Afghanistan their home, who lived there for decades, or who want to stay close to extended family. And there are Americans who are still evaluating their decision to leave based on the situation on the ground that evolves daily, in fact, that evolves hourly. Some are understandably very scared. Each has a set of personal priorities and considerations that they alone can weigh. They may even change their mind from one day to the next, as has happened, and will likely continue to happen. Finally, over the past 10 days, we've been moving hundreds of American citizens out of Afghanistan every day, in most cases guided to the airport by us, in some cases getting there on their own, in other cases with the help of third countries or private initiatives. We cross-check our list against flight manifests, against arrival records, against other databases. There's usually a lag of about 24 hours for us to verify their status. So when you take into account all of these inputs that we use to arrive at our assessment of the number of Americans still in Afghanistan and who want to leave, you start to understand why this is a hard number to pin down at any given moment and why we're constantly refining it. And that's also why we continue to be relentless in our outreach. Since August 14th, we've reached out directly to every American enrolled with us in Afghanistan, often multiple times. Hundreds of consular officers, locally employed staff, here in Washington, at dozens of embassies and consulates around the world, are part of what has been an unprecedented operation. They're phone banking, text banking, writing and responding to emails, working around the clock to communicate individually with Americans on the ground. Since August 14th, we've sent more than 20,000 emails to enrolled individuals, initiated more than 45,000 phone calls, and used other means of communication, cycling through and updating our list repeatedly. We're also integrating information in real time that's provided to us by members of Congress, by non-governmental organizations, and U.S. citizens about Americans who may be in Afghanistan and want to get out. These contacts are how we determine the whereabouts of Americans who may be in Afghanistan, whether they want to leave, whether they need help, and then to give them specific, tailored instructions on how to leave with real-time emergency contact numbers to use should they need it. Now, let me turn to the number of Americans who've been evacuated. As I said, we believe we've evacuated more than 4,500 U.S. passport holders, as well as their families. That number is also a dynamic one. That's because in this critical stretch, we're focused on getting Americans and their families onto planes out of Afghanistan as quickly as possible, and then processing the total numbers when they're safely out of the country. We also verify our numbers to make sure that we aren't inadvertently undercounting or double counting. So I wanted to lay all that out because I know it is a fundamental question that so many of you have had, and it really merits going through the information, the explanation, so you see how we arrive at it. While evacuating Americans is our top priority, we're also committed to getting out as many Afghans at risk as we can before the 31st. That starts with our locally employed staff, the folks who've been working side by side in our embassy with our diplomatic team. And it includes special immigrant visa program participants and also other Afghans at risk. It's hard to overstate the complexity and the danger of this effort. We're operating in a hostile environment in a city and country now controlled by the Taliban, with the very real possibility of an ISIS-K attack. We're taking every precaution, but this is very high risk. As the President said yesterday, we're on track to complete our mission by August 31st, provided the Taliban continue to cooperate and there are no disruptions to this effort. The President has also asked for contingency plans in case he determines that we must remain in the country past that date. But let me be crystal clear about this. There is no deadline on our work to help any remaining American citizens who decide they want to leave to do so, along with the many Afghans who have stood by us over these many years and want to leave and have been unable to do so. That effort will continue every day past August 31st. The Taliban have made public and private commitments to provide and permit safe passage for Americans, for third country nationals, and Afghans at risk going forward past August 31st. The United States, our allies and partners, and more than half of the world's countries, 114 in all, issued a statement making it clear to the Taliban that they have a responsibility to hold to that commitment and provide safe passage for anyone who wishes to leave the country, not just for the duration of our evacuation and relocation mission, but for every day thereafter. And we're developing detailed plans for how we can continue to provide consular support and facilitate departures for those who wish to leave after August 31st. Our expectation, the expectation of the international community, is that people who want to leave Afghanistan after the U.S. military departs should be able to do so. Together, we will do everything we can to see that that expectation is met. Let me just close with a note on the diplomatic front. In all, more than 24 countries on 4 continents are contributing to the effort to transit, temporarily house, or resettle those who we are evacuating. That didn't just happen. It's the product of an intense diplomatic effort to secure, detail, and implement transit agreements and resettlement commitments. We are deeply grateful to those countries for their generous assistance. This is one of the largest airlifts in history, a massive military, diplomatic, security, and humanitarian undertaking. It's a testament both to U.S. leadership and to the strength of our alliances and partnerships. We'll be relying and building upon that strength moving forward as we work with our allies and partners to forge a unified diplomatic approach to Afghanistan. That was a point the President underscored in yesterday's G7 leaders meeting on Afghanistan. And it's one that I and other senior members of the State Department have made in our constant communication with allies and partners in recent days to ensure that we're aligned and united as we move forward. Not only when it comes to the immediate mission, but also on what happens after August 31st, on counterterrorism, on humanitarian assistance, on our expectations of a future Afghan government. That intense diplomatic work is ongoing as we speak, and it will continue in the days and weeks ahead. So, I talked a lot about numbers this afternoon, but even as we're laser focused on the mission, we know that this is about real people. Many scared, many desperate. I've seen the images, I've read the stories, I've heard the voices, so much of that reported by you and your colleagues so courageously. Like many of you, I read the report of the Afghan translator whose 2-year-old daughter was trampled to death on Saturday while waiting outside the airport. I've got 2 small kids of my own. Reading that story and others was like getting punched in the gut. All of us at the State Department and across the U.S. government feel that way. We know that lives and futures, starting with our fellow citizens, including the lives of children, hang in the balance during these critical days. And that's why everyone on our team is putting everything they have into this effort.